Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are here on the third edition of Sentinel podcast series. We have with us our colleague and friend Yannis from IDIR, which
Hello.
is also a partner from Sentinel. Hello, Yannis. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation. We pretty much welcome you here. So I'll basically pass the floor to you, and if you can just give us a few words about who you are, what do you do, and basically the role of IDIR within Sentinel. Yannis.
Okay. Thanks again for the invitation. I'm Yannis Skourtis. I work for IDIR, an Irish SME that focuses on research on various ICT fields. And I'm the company's technical director and CTO. And we're proud to participate in the Sentinel project, which tackles, let's say, cybersecurity and personal data protection issues dedicated to SMEs. Our role in Sentinel focuses on two or three main areas. The main of these is setting the baseline for the project and setting, the state of the art, let's say, in the landscape of where cybersecurity and personal data protection stands now, both in general and specifically for the SMEs, and to act as a technology contributor in the project in various aspects of the Sentinel architecture, and also to provide insight wherever we can with our expertise and experience in the field. So I also think it's a very interesting project, and I say that literally, not just as a project partner. And I hope here today we can help provide some more insight that will make the project more approachable and understandable to the average SMEs and the persons and the companies that stand to benefit from Sentinel.
Thank you, Yannis, for your words. I guess Sentinel is very ambitious project. Know that some of the concepts that also Sentinel also tries to achieve and to aim is this notion of creating awareness with regards to some concepts like GDPR compliance, personal data protection, and all that. So this probably leads to my first question to you. It's taking into account what Sentinel main objectives are, and also on the other hand side, take into account, let's say, the European landscape of SMEs, so the SMEs ecosystem. How do you, in your perspective, of course, but how do you see, let's say, the level of maturity of most of the SMEs on the European space with regards to some of these concepts, with regards to, for instance, GDPR compliance? Is this the kind of vocabulary that it's already familiar with most of the SMEs? They know what we are talking about. How do you see actually the current landscape on these regards?
Okay. Well, my personal view is, I agree with your definition of maturity. Maturity is a multifaceted thing with regards to personal data protection, and the GDPR is all about personal data protection. And I think the maturity level is very low in the European landscape and globally, to be frank. And the thing is, I don't think there's a single SME that hasn't heard the word GDPR or hasn't heard the concept of personal data protection. I mean, we've all heard about it. They all know that some legislation has come into place, and that maybe they have to be compliant and all of these things. But in reality, very few of these SMEs actually know that they have a role to play towards this compliance, and they have to understand things in depth about how they operate in order to be compliant. Or compliance is the result, but to have this journey towards compliance. So yes, we are a little bit plagued by this lack of awareness. And this is as usually, and as was the case in cybersecurity before before personal data protection became such a big focus alongside cybersecurity. I think this is driven by a number of challenges with the SMEs, and most of these challenges they go alongside or are similar to the challenges that these companies have with technology in general. The thing with personal data protection is that it can be driven by technology, but it's not just technology. It's also about organizational change and the way you manage this organizational change during the course of time. So personal data protection is not about purchasing this and configuring this piece of software and you're solving the problem, or hiring an expert or hiring some GDPR consultant and solving the problem this way. It's about primarily having in-house in-house and in-depth understanding of your data flows and your processes. For example, in the case how they're exemplified in what we say the personal data processing activities, and how we operate within them, and what is the risk involved with them, where this journey towards compliance starts. So yeah, the challenges are numerous. Yeah, we can quote.
Let me just go a little bit back, Yannis, because you started out by saying that, okay, there are already some SMEs that are already paving the way towards that direction, towards, for instance, GDPR compliance. But I guess that this is still a minority. Why do you think this is happening? It's because of, I don't know, being financially capable of implementing such kind of policies and measures internally, or it's something that goes a little bit beyond having this kind of possibility?
Okay, I think this is primarily driven by complexity, to be frank. You have to bring together two different worlds: the world of the legal recommendations and the legal part of GDPR, and on the other way, the organizational technical measures that have to be implemented. And it's very hard sometimes to understand the complexity that these two worlds bring together. That's why in Sentinel we're talking about bridging the gap. And it's also, even technically, there are also gaps between purely technical cybersecurity approaches and approaches related to personal data protection and privacy. But the challenges are wider. You know, they can range from generic lack of awareness. There can be lack of resources and the lack of having a dedicated budget towards cybersecurity and personal data protection. And there can be, you know, the lack of simple, easy to understand and easy to follow proper rules and regulations that are properly addressed at SMEs and not experts. It can be the lack of good cybersecurity and PDP expertise and the lack of talent in the field. There are too many issues. In my opinion, like the prevalent one, and I think Anissa agrees on this, is the lack of broader management support in SMEs, which is to say, in other words, that SME owners or key stakeholders are sometimes reluctant to drive the necessary budget or the necessary allocation of resources for implementing the proper personal data protection practices. And the reason to do that is, you know, the perceived lack of relevance. So that they could say, why would my SME be an attractive target for cyber attacks or data breaches? Or it has never happened before, why would it happen now? Or especially those that have never been the victim of a ransomware attack or some other kind of data breach, are mostly driven by their day-to-day business and more reluctant to introduce new things and new discussions in the sector.
Mm-hmm. This is a very I think a very important aspect. The other one we can think of, for instance, some of the SMEs are already aware of it. They know that there are certain policies, certain procedures that they need to follow. But probably some of them, they need some kind of, and I guess that you briefly touched this, guidance. Okay, they need guidance. They need kind of mentoring because they pretty much don't know. Okay, how should I start? How should I start my process here? And this probably leads to my second question, which is with regards to this, with regards to let's say recommending someone to do something. Where do you think that, for instance, Sentinel here as a project can also support this gap and can also bring value added to these specific SMEs that we are now talking about? So basically are the SMEs that, okay, they know what they have to do, but basically they don't know how to start the engine.
Okay. First, we did touch on that a little bit before. There has to be a spark of interest. I mean, Sentinel by itself, Sentinel's mission is not to raise general awareness about GDPR, this is for sure, or about personal data protection. It's not about generic awareness raising. It's about the step that comes just after that. Okay, so Sentinel is about offering a simple toolkit where SME stakeholders without technical expertise or without in-depth understanding of the workings of cybersecurity and PDP tools can model their business, gain awareness, perform a series of assessments, and get recommendations. Okay, so, well, let's start from the overarching value proposition of the project, which is, as advertised, that it bridges the gap between cybersecurity, privacy, and personal data protection, and especially tailored for SMEs. And how Sentinel actually delivers on this promise is by better acquainting these companies with the concept of the risk that arises from processing personal data and helping these companies calibrate their perception of this risk according to the legal provisions introduced by the GDPR. Okay, so this is actually made possible through a set of self-assessment processes which Sentinel enables that increase the company's visibility into both this risk that we're talking about, I mean the risk associated with their personal data processing activities, and the available measures, talking about the organizational and technical measures that are available to tackle and to address this risk. Okay, so yeah, in our consortium, we know that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach for cybersecurity and personal data protection. And we do know that most SMEs and most organizations, at the end of the day, they will not avoid having to hire expert help. They will not avoid having to go to special HR and legal and the cybersecurity technical experts to increase their robustness to attacks and to demonstrate GDPR compliance. But Sentinel, it will measurably increase their awareness and deeper understanding of the GDPR requirements and their own company's posture towards data protection and cybersecurity. In effect, helping them make even more informed and aware choices in the future in the field. And you might ask me, are there any comparable offerings in the market, or can that be solved by many of the PDP and cybersecurity solutions out there? And we have done extensive research in the project, and we think that we do innovate in a way by offering profiling capabilities for both personal data protection and personal data processing activities aspects and cybersecurity aspects of the participant SMEs. And then following this up with intelligent recommendations that use what we call a risk-based approach. When we say risk-based approach, we mean that we recommend measures that are both appropriate to the organizational details and the specific cyber infrastructure of these companies, and proportional to the level of risk that is specifically identified for the processing activities, using an established DPIA process. DPA means data protection impact assessment. And on the side, we're also offering a series of dedicated tools to help them assess the GDPR compliance level and gain cybersecurity awareness and training. So yeah, there are multiple challenges out there, and we're out there to remedy it.
Yeah. Also something that we haven't covered yet quite well here on this talk. It's not only about the SMEs themselves, but also it's concerns who actually engage with these SMEs. For instance, let's say suppliers, let's say, for instance, clients, the final end users. So putting the heads of this, let's say, of these people, of this kind of users. So there is a certain way of, let's say, guarantee if I'm doing business with someone that, into some extent, it's also GDPR compliance, and it's capable of using any kind of process and measures to make personal data protection. Into some extent, it can also be used as, let's say, I'm not calling this a certification, but someone that assesses or certifies that someone is eager, or I'm more prone to do business with this kind of company.
It's an excellent question, and I think this is the most important question that is not effectively answered by the various awareness campaigns around GDPR. To the experts, it's the most obvious thing, but to the SMEs themselves, it's the least obvious thing. That GDPR is not about strengthening your company against the reputational damage introduced by a data breach. It's about protecting the fundamental rights of individuals. Okay, so GDPR is about this. GDPR is about enforcing the fundamental human rights and the rights of the individuals. And this is where SMEs come into play. These individuals are usually in the employees and the customers. Okay, partners and suppliers are, of course, also included. But these are the most vulnerable groups, okay? Because you have full access as a data controller of your employees, and to quite a big degree, you have control over the data of your customers. So it's about protecting the personal data of these people that is at stake. So being able to demonstrate compliance and to demonstrate that you take the protection of the data seriously, with specific measures, and by keeping records and amending these records regularly, and by having specific organizational and technical measures in place, etc., is what, at the end of the day, is better business. And I agree with all the awareness campaigns on this, that by being GDPR compliant, you are actually attracting more and better business in a way. But we need to help to make SME stakeholders more aware that it is about that. It's not just about legal obligations. It's about, the individuals and the citizens themselves are becoming more and more aware of that fact, which can be showcased by the need for better data management tools out there, the need for increased data portability, increased data sovereignty. Sophisticated citizens are requiring more ownership over their data. They're looking for more privacy, and they're looking to be the owners of their own data and not to hand over complete control of their data to third parties. And this sophistication is spilling over to more and more citizens out there as we speak. So looking to the future, we hope to see a future where everyone cares about their privacy, where privacy is understood as a fundamental right, not the invasion of privacy, but privacy itself, and where the data subjects and the citizens themselves care about their privacy and take the extra step to take ownership of their data. And having said that, Sentinel does offer a very valuable tool towards this step, which is the integrated identity management system, which gives SME data subjects and primarily customers and partners a way to own their own data and to move it from vendor to vendor, effectively implementing the best practices in data sovereignty and data portability.
That would be, I would say, my next question. It's looking a little bit beyond, looking a little bit in the future. Let's say in the next, I don't know, the next 3-4 years, how do you, because we started this conversation by basically having a let's say description of the landscape, the current landscape of SMEs, the European SMEs at the moment. How do you foresee within the next 3 or 4 years, are we going to have this the same discussion that we are having here at this moment? Have the same discussion within the next 3 or 4 years? Do you think that SMEs will be pretty much more, let's say, GDPR and personal data protection compliant for the time? How do you frame it in the future?
I think it's a difficult question, Ruben. It's hard to predict how much compliance will have gone in the next 3 or 4 years. I don't think 3 or 4 years is a very big time frame in terms of compliance metrics. I think it would be a great gain if we can say that in a few years' time we have raised enough awareness among SMEs, which are, by far the most populous cohort of businesses out there, with millions and millions of SMEs operating out there. So even in my perception, even raising awareness as much as having the key stakeholders in SMEs realize what data protection is really about, and the fact that data protection is really about protecting individual rights and liberties, including their own. Because an SME stakeholder can be a data subject to another with another data controller, and so on and so forth. It's about all of us as individuals. Raising awareness in that respect would be a major gain. Now, the question you asked sometimes is seen from the perspective of technology and from the perspective of the market and from several other perspectives. But this is a very, very complex and sophisticated marketplace. Okay, it's not the marketplace that it was 20 years ago with cybersecurity. Okay, it's wildly different. I mean, in the past, it was let's say, it was quite a big market, but it was simple at the same time, because you used to have a few antivirus and anti-malware offerings, which required some relatively minimal expertise to get it up and running, and combined with some employee awareness and training, you might get some decent security in your business. But today, it has become much more complicated. With on the one hand, the GDPR requirements for data protection, and on the other hand, even more sophisticated attacks and like phishing and ransomware attacks lurking at every corner. I think SMEs today can't hope to really feel secure with just a few well-placed purchases like they used to do in the past. They need to be actually invested themselves into awareness about data protection, etc. And this journey starts with familiarizing themselves with the GDPR, with familiarizing themselves with where their own company's personal data processing activities, how they are structured, what is their context, what is the risk associated with them, what are the data flows associated with it, what are the measures in place and the potential measures which may accompany these activities, or the mitigative stuff. It's complex, and this complexity is what drives us to the inference that we will not avoid having experts and having a lot of consulting with the companies, but the companies will be in much better place if they don't start at zero knowledge, when they go after these experts, but try to raise their awareness as much as possible, try to raise their awareness of their own structures and their own obligations as much as possible before going to get help. I think this is where bridging the gap actually happens. Okay, raising awareness as much as possible, raising awareness first and foremost of their compliance status, raising awareness of their actual processing activities and how potential breaches might happen and how individuals might be affected, what is the risk involved, by having this awareness and having by having a basic awareness of a simplified view of the legal requirements, they will be in a better place to seek expert legal and technical help delivering privacy and personal data protection, I think. So, which, at the end of the day, it brings forward a new market. Okay, and I think the existing cybersecurity and privacy players, they will compete in this marketplace. But in my view, due to the complexity that we already described, there will be less space in this market for example, end-to-end automated solutions like the cybersecurity software we're used to seeing, and more space for consulting and awareness raising.
Thank you, Yannis, for this clarification, for your explanations. I think you pretty much sum it quite well. We are pretty much close to the end. We just have one last question. Maybe it could be a little bit off topic, but you mentioned several times about the level of complexity and how the things are more complicated right now than it were, I don't know, 20 years back. We can see it on the news every day. It's just turning on the TV and you see that there was a data breach, there was this cybersecurity incident that took place in this company. So it's happening too fast, okay? We had, for instance, a couple of years ago, we were able actually to see it live when there is a data breach, where this data, what are the purpose of using the data that resulted from this data breach. We know what the effects of this data breach. Do you think that this kind of events, to some extent, are actually driving this force, are actually pushing, because you also mentioned about the cybersecurity market. Do you think that this could be also enablers for putting the things into a, let's say, a fast pace than there was, let's say, 20 years ago? Do you think that cybersecurity is now a trend? Everyone talks about cybersecurity. Do you know that it's also being a drive force?
I'll tell you the simple fact that for the past few years, we also had a complete and a very high budget Netflix show on cybersecurity. I think it was called Mr. Robot, and most of the people I know have seen it. But what we need to differentiate here is this high-profile, rockstar approach to what we used to call hacking, or these cyber incidents, compared to what's really at stake for SMEs. Because in the SMEs, the landscape is very different. You might hear in the news for these high-profile breaches and these high-profile ransomware attacks that have this multi-billion dollars businesses going out of business for some time and having to pay ransoms, etc. And this is what driving the news. And of course, SME stakeholders do hear all about that, but it's very hard for them to relate that this is a threat that they are also facing. So we need to get the message in the ears of SME stakeholders that these ransomware attacks and these sophisticated threats that were not around 10 years ago, but they are here today. They are also targeting SMEs, and I might also dare say that they're primarily targeting SMEs, because SMEs have their guard down. SMEs have far worse cybersecurity and privacy protections compared to larger enterprises, and you can use automation to a very large degree to try to get a ransom and to try to get the gains from exploiting SME vulnerabilities compared to targeting big businesses or big organizations. So the landscape is changing, but it's not just through these high-profile events that are happening. It's changing before our eyes. I've personally been the witness to in numerous SMEs, going out of business for a few days or longer because their basic systems stopped operating. And this is less a risk of reputational damage, because SMEs don't have that super high reputational risk compared to big enterprises. But having your data subjects or your customers' sensitive data exposed, this is another story, and we'll need to be acutely aware of the dangers involved and the risks. So at the end of the day, it's about raising awareness.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yannis, for this conversation that we had. It was very nice to have you here. We pretty much reached the end of this conversation.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure. So this interview is going to be available on YouTube channel. So we invite everyone also to spend some time with us. Thank you very much, Yannis.
Thank you, Ruben and Claudio, and it was a pleasure. And speak soon. Bye bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.